The contact arrived in my queue at the third cycle mark, a routine ping from the lane monitor buoys strung across Transit 7, freight corridor running parallel to the Conclave's inner spiral. I was Verath, classification arbiter, 9th tier, responsible for logging all contacts in the 7 outer transit lanes and assigning them their proper file. I had held that post for 19 cycles without incident. The Conclave's archive held entries for every vessel type, every hull configuration, every drive signature that had ever moved through our space. If a thing moved, I classified it. If I classified it, it existed in a manageable way. The hull on my readout was small. Compact was the word my initial subroutine returned. Compact and low emission, moving at a pace consistent with Courier class or light freighter. The archive partial matched it to a Terran design designation from 7 cycles back. The Arwen-class dispatch vessel used by human trade consortiums for small cargo runs. Mass reading consistent. Drive output within expected variance. I flagged it provisional civilian, assigned it a log number, and moved on. 40,000 nodes of the Conclave were occupied with matters of actual consequence. A border reclassification dispute in the outer Keth corridors. Bulk tonnage anomaly near the Sharev waypoints. I had 17 other contacts queued ahead of the Transit 7 hull. I gave it 4 seconds of attention. The archive said Courier. I said Courier. That was how the Conclave worked. It did not reduce speed at the lane checkpoint. Every registered vessel in Transit 7 reduced speed at the checkpoint. It was not a regulation that required enforcement. It was simply what vessels did, because the checkpoint buoys broadcast the reduction signal and vessels responded. I noted the non-reduction at cycle mark 4 and sent a standard query. Identification, registry, cargo manifest, destination. Query went out on the standard band. No response. I flagged it for a secondary scan and pulled the enhanced return. That was when the archive began disagreeing with itself. The drive signature, the specific resonance pattern the initial scan had matched to the Arwen class, was wrong. Not drifted wrong, not degraded wrong, wrong in a way that said the first reading had been a surface measurement and the surface had been designed to produce that measurement. Underneath it, the drive signature returned a frequency my archive had no classification for. I ran it 3 times. The archive returned null on each pass. Mass reading. I had initially logged the hull at 412 standard units, consistent with light freight class. The enhanced scan returned something in excess of 11,000 units. I checked the buoy calibration. Were functioning within on tolerance. The hull was 11,000 units and had been presenting as 412. I did not have a word for that in the civilian vessel taxonomy. Emissions profile. 3 of the hull's 7 subsystem signatures returned null. Not unknown, null. The archive's null designation meant the subsystem had never been filed. In 19 cycles as classification arbiter had received a null return twice, both times on derelict hardware of uncertain origin. I was receiving 3 nulls simultaneously from a vessel that was moving, accelerating, and had just crossed the checkpoint buoy threshold without slowing. I escalated. The Conclave convened 40,000 nodes on my alert in 4 seconds. The fastest full assembly I had ever seen it execute. Arbiters of every tier pulling focus from their queues. Senior logic nodes dropping the border dispute, the tonnage anomaly, 17 other matters. All of it set aside. Because I had sent one word with my escalation that the Conclave did not treat lightly, unclassifiable. In the Conclave's logic, an unclassifiable contact was not merely an unknown. It was a structural failure, evidence that the archive was incomplete. An incomplete archive could not govern, could not assign threat tiers, could not route resources, not make the probability calculations that kept 40,000 nodes in synchronized function. The archive being incomplete was, to the Conclave, what a structural crack is to a dam. It did not matter how small the crack was. The full node assembly ran its own scans. 40,000 logic minds pulling at the hull's data returned simultaneously, cross-referencing, running parallel taxonomy searches through every filing in the archive. I watched the query stick. Terran vessel records. No match beyond the surface, Arwen-class ghost the hull had been projecting. Drive signatures. Null deepening to absolute null on 2 additional subsystems as the enhanced scan penetrated further into the hull's interior. Weapons taxonomy. I had not even queried weapons yet. The Conclave queried weapons. The archive returned nothing, not unknown, not partial. Nothing. As if the query had fallen into empty space with nothing to catch it. The hull carried weapon systems that had never been filed anywhere in the Conclave's 19-cycle record of every armament that moved through our lanes. Weapons that did not exist, according to the only source of existence the Conclave recognized. 40,000 nodes went very quiet. Not silent, we were still processing, still running queries, still attempting the reclassification that my senior tier had authorized. Quiet the way a logic system goes quiet when its core axiom is threatened. We had built the Conclave on one principle. Everything that exists can be filed. Everything filed can be managed. The hull in Transit 7 was telling us, in the flat language of sensor data, that we had been wrong. And we had been wrong specifically about the one civilization we had spent 7 cycles logging as low threat, low complexity, manageable. The Conclave's senior node sent a hail. Full spectrum, authoritative, the broadcast the Conclave used when it wanted a vessel. Understand that 40,000 logic minds were now paying attention. The hail carried our reclassification request, our demand for identification, threat tier notice. It was, in the Conclave's estimation, an overwhelming message. No vessel that understood what the Conclave was would ignore that hail, the hull answered. 11 words. I logged them because that is what I do. I log contacts, I assign classifications, I build the archive. I logged them, and then I sat with them for the 2 seconds I had before the hull's weapon systems. The ones that did not exist, opened. The 11 words were, "The Iron Chorus does not require your archive's permission to exist." I did not finish the reclassification. I had the new threat tier drafted. The highest tier the Conclave had ever assigned, a designation we had maintained theoretically for over a decade without ever applying it. And I did not finish it, because the weapons firing took 11 minutes and 40,000 nodes is, it turns out, not very many when the thing doing the firing has no entry in any archive, which means no known countermeasure, which means the Conclave's response protocols were reaching into empty space, the same way my weapons query had. I watched the node count drop, not chaotically, methodically. The Iron Chorus moved through Transit 7 on its original heading, not deviating, accelerating beyond its already impossible speed. It was not hunting. It was transiting. We had placed ourselves between it and its destination, and it was removing that obstacle with the same flat efficiency with which I had, 4 seconds earlier, been filing a Courier. 39,400, 38,112. The numbers fell the way archive entries fall when a reclassification cascades. Clean, ceremony. I kept logging. It is the only thing I know how to do. Hull designation, Iron Chorus. Classification status, 14 subsystems. Threat tier, unassignable. No tier in the archive reaches this. Origin, Terran. Mass, 11,207 standard units. Time to full Conclave silence at current attrition rate, 11 minutes, 4 seconds. Actual time to full Conclave silence, 11 minutes, 1 second. I was the last node. I do not know why. Geography of the node network, perhaps. For the Iron Chorus working outward from the Conclave center and reaching my position last. I had 3 seconds after the 39,999th node went dark, and I used them the way any good arbiter would. I filed the contact. Hull, Iron Chorus, classification, classifiable, threat tier, absolute, archive status, incomplete, recommendation, do not log as Courier. Then, the Iron Chorus crossed the final buoy threshold of Transit 7 and continued on its assigned heading, and the archive had 40,000 fewer nodes to tell it what existed and what did not. It did not seem to notice.